October 23, 2009, Turin, Italy. Giuseppe Romano had been polishing the same wine glass for 20 minutes when the most hated man in Italian football walked through his door. Diego Maradona. Bloated, gray, dying. The bar fell silent. 30 Juventus ultras stopped mid-conversation. Every eye locked on the man who had torn their hearts out for a decade with Napoli. The man who had made them weep in 1987, 1989, 1990. But Giuseppe knew something they didn't. He knew why Maradona was really here. He knew about the envelope in his pocket, the one with Marco's name written in Maradona's trembling handwriting. The soccer legend shuffled forward, stopped at the bar where Giuseppe's dead son's jersey hung, and whispered 4 words that would haunt every witness: "I need to confess." What happened next became the most debated story in Turin football history. Some say Maradona begged, others say he wept. But everyone agrees on one thing: Giuseppe Romano's choice that night changed everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wine glass shattered against the floor. Giuseppe's hands, steady through 15 years of serving drinks, steady through his wife's funeral, steady through everything except this, betrayed him. 30 pairs of eyes snapped from Maradona to the fragments scattered across the worn wooden planks of Bar Zebra. "Merda," Giuseppe whispered, dropping behind the bar. His knees cracked as they hit the floor, and for a moment he stayed there, breathing hard among the glittering shards. Through the forest of bar stools he could see Maradona's scuffed leather shoes, designer once, now cracked and stained like everything else about the man. "Bep?" called Salvatore from table 3. "You all right?" Giuseppe's fingers found a larger piece of glass, sharp enough. The thought came unbidden, how easy it would be to stand up, to drag that jagged edge across the throat of the man who had destroyed his world. The ultras would call it justice. They might even help. But Marco's jersey hung above him like a silent witness, and Giuseppe heard his son's voice from some impossible distance: "Papa, don't become a monster for me." He stood slowly, glass crunching under his shoes. Maradona hadn't moved. Up close, the legend looked like what he was, a 50-year-old addict whose body was failing him. His face, once cherubic and defiant, had collapsed into jowls and shadows. But his eyes still held that terrible intelligence that had terrorized Serie A. "Giuseppe Romano," Maradona said quietly. Not a question. The bar had gone tomb silent. Even the ancient espresso machine seemed to hold its breath. "We're closed," Giuseppe said. "No, you're not." Maradona's voice carried the weight of exhaustion. "It's only 9. You close at midnight. You've closed at midnight every day for 23 years except Christmas and the day after—" He stopped himself. "The day after Marco died." The words hung unspoken between them. Giuseppe's hand moved instinctively toward the baseball bat he kept behind the register. American ash. Marco had bought it for him as a joke. "Papa, this is how they handle troublemakers in the movies." "You need to leave," Giuseppe said. "I can't." Maradona reached slowly into his jacket pocket. The entire bar tensed. Salvatore's chair scraped against the floor as he started to stand. But it wasn't a weapon Maradona produced. It was an envelope, yellowed, creased, like it had been carried for 15 years. Giuseppe's vision blurred. He gripped the bar's edge until his knuckles went white. "Marco Romano," Maradona read from the envelope. "That was his name, wasn't it? Your boy?" Someone behind them sucked in a sharp breath. Giuseppe couldn't turn around, because if he broke eye contact with Maradona now, he might collapse entirely. "You don't get to say his name," Giuseppe managed. "I've been saying it every night for 15 years. Maradona set the envelope on the bar. In my prayers, in my nightmares. When I wake up screaming at 3 in the morning, it's his name I'm screaming." The rain outside had intensified, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. The neon Juventus logo in the front window flickered, casting intermittent shadows across Maradona's ravaged face. Giuseppe stared at the envelope. His son's name written in handwriting he recognized from 1,000 autographs. Shaky now, but unmistakably Maradona's. "What's in it?" he whispered. "The truth." Behind them, chairs scraped. Feet shuffled. The ultras were moving closer, sensing blood in the water. These were men who had screamed Maradona's name as a curse for 2 decades, who had burned his effigy in the streets after Napoli's victories, who would tear him apart if Giuseppe gave the word. "The truth," Giuseppe repeated. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, hollow, like it was echoing up from a well. "You want to tell me the truth now? 15 years later?" "I'm dying," Maradona said simply. "Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but soon, and I can't," his voice cracked, "I can't go to hell carrying this alone anymore." Giuseppe looked up at Marco's jersey. Number 10, like Maradona's had been. Like father, like son, they had both worshipped at the altar of beautiful football, right until the moment football's most beautiful player had snuffed out everything good in their world. The envelope sat between them like a loaded gun. Giuseppe realized that everyone in the bar was holding their breath, waiting for his decision. Even the rain seemed to pause. The whole universe balanced on a knife's edge, waiting to see what a father would do when faced with the man who had murdered his son. His hand moved toward the envelope, then stopped. "Get out," he said. Maradona's face collapsed. "Please, you don't understand." "I said get out!" Giuseppe's voice exploded across the bar. "Before I let them tear you apart." The silence that followed Giuseppe's roar stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Maradona's shoulders sagged as if Giuseppe's words had physically struck him. He looked older suddenly, smaller, a broken man in an expensive coat that had seen better decades. "Vaffanculo," growled Franco, one of the regulars. His chair scraped against the floor as he stood. "Say the word, Beppe. We'll drag this piece of shit into the alley ourselves." Giuseppe held up a trembling hand without taking his eyes off Maradona. "No." His voice came out as a whisper, then stronger. "No. He leaves. Now." Maradona picked up the envelope with hands that shook almost as badly as Giuseppe's. For a moment their fingers nearly touched across the scarred wooden bar, the same bar where Giuseppe had lifted Marco as a toddler to hang Christmas decorations, where his son had done homework while Giuseppe worked late into the evening, where they had celebrated Juventus victories with stolen sips of wine when Marco thought his father wasn't watching. "Keep it," Giuseppe said, nodding toward the envelope. "Whatever's in there, I don't want to know." "You need to know," Maradona insisted. "Your daughter?" "Don't." The word came out like a gunshot. Giuseppe's whole body went rigid. "Don't you dare mention Elena." Maradona's mouth opened as if to say more, then closed. He tucked the envelope back into his coat with the careful movements of a man who had learned to navigate the world while his body betrayed him. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the door. The ultras watched him go like wolves watching wounded prey. Their eyes asked the same question. "Are you sure, Beppe? Are you really going to let him walk away?" The door chimed as it closed behind Maradona. Through the rain-streaked window, Giuseppe watched him pause under the broken streetlight outside. For a heartbeat, their eyes met through the glass. Then Maradona pulled his coat tighter and disappeared into the October darkness. Giuseppe's legs gave out. He dropped onto the stool behind the bar, Marco's stool, where his son used to sit and watch him work, chattering about school and football and girls while polishing glasses with a dish rag too big for his small hands. "Madonna mia," breathed Salvatore. "Was that really—" 15 years, Giuseppe said, more to himself than anyone else. 15 years and he walks into my bar like he's ordering a drink. The assembled men began to stir, voices rising in a mixture of disbelief and rage. What did he want? What was in the envelope? How did he have the balls to show his face here? Giuseppe reached for the bottle of grappa he kept beneath the register. The good stuff, not the swill he served to tourists. His hands still shook as he poured. The amber liquid caught the light from Marco's jersey case, throwing golden reflections across the photographs that covered the wall behind the bar. Marco at 5, gap-toothed in his first Juventus kit. Marco at 12, serious and focused at football camp. Marco at 17, the last photo, graduation day, arms around Giuseppe and his mother, future brightest summer. "Beppe," Franco said gently. "You want us to follow him? Make sure he doesn't come back?" Giuseppe drained the grappa in one burning swallow. "He won't be back." But even as he said it, he knew he was lying. Men like Maradona, men carrying that kind of weight, they didn't give up easily. Giuseppe had seen that look before. in his own reflection during the dark months after Marco's death, when he'd considered joining his son in whatever came after this life. The rain intensified, drumming against the windows with increasing urgency. Giuseppe's customers began settling their tabs, gathering umbrellas and coats, casting uncertain glances his way. Word would spread. By tomorrow, half of Turin would know that Diego Maradona had walked into Bar Zebra. By tomorrow, the questions would start. "Franco," Giuseppe called as the older man prepared to leave. "Do me a favor. Don't mention this to Elena when you see her." Franco paused, his weathered face creasing with concern. "You sure that's wise? She's going to hear about it anyway." Giuseppe nodded toward the framed photo on the shelf behind the register. Elena at last year's Christmas dinner, laughing at something Marco would never say again. She had their mother's eyes, dark and trusting, and Marco's stubborn chin. At 28, she was building a life as a social worker in Milan, helping broken families heal from tragedies not unlike their own. "She doesn't need this," Giuseppe said. "Not yet." Franco nodded slowly and left with the others. Giuseppe locked the door behind the last customer and turned off the neon sign. In the sudden quiet, he could hear his own heartbeat, the distant hum of traffic, the rain that seemed to be washing the very color from the world outside. He looked up at Marco's jersey one more time, then at the spot on the bar where the envelope had rested. Tomorrow would bring questions he wasn't ready to answer. Tonight, he would drink and remember, and try not to dream of dark roads and broken glass. Giuseppe poured himself another grappa, then another. The bottle grew lighter as the rain grew heavier, drumming against the windows of Bar Zebra like the heartbeat of some restless ghost. He had switched off the overhead lights, leaving only the soft glow from Marco's jersey case and the flickering neon from the street to illuminate the empty bar. The silence felt different now, contaminated. For 15 years, this space had been his sanctuary, his temple to memory where Marco's presence lived on in every photograph, every trophy, every carefully preserved moment of a life cut short. But Maradona had poisoned it simply by breathing the same air, by speaking Marco's name with those lips that had once kissed championship cups. Giuseppe's phone buzzed against the bar, a text message. Probably Franco, checking on him, or maybe Salvatore wanting to gossip about what they'd witnessed. He ignored it. The phone buzzed again, then again. "Basta," he muttered, grabbing the device. But the messages weren't from Franco or Salvatore. They weren't from anyone in his contacts list at all. The number was international, Argentine. The first message was a photo. Giuseppe's blood turned to ice water. It was Marco. Not a photo Giuseppe recognized. His son standing outside what looked like a nightclub, arm around a girl with long dark hair. Marco was laughing, caught mid-sentence, looking impossibly young and alive. He was wearing the leather jacket Giuseppe had bought him for his 18th birthday, the one that had been cut off his body by paramedics. The time stamp on the photo read, March 15, 1994. 3 days before Marco died. Giuseppe's hands shook so violently he nearly dropped the phone. The second message was another photo. Marco inside the same club, drinks on a table, surrounded by young people Giuseppe didn't recognize. His son looked happy, carefree, everything a 19-year-old should be on a Friday night. The third message wasn't a photo. It was text. He wasn't supposed to be there that night. Elena knows why he was... Giuseppe stared at the screen until the words blurred. The room seemed to tilt around him. Marco had told him he was studying that night, staying in with friends to prepare for exams. Giuseppe had given him money for pizza and beer, kissed his forehead like he was still a child, told him not to stay up too late. But Marco had been at a nightclub in Naples, where Juventus had just beaten Napoli 3-1, where the streets would have been chaos, where Juventus supporters would have been persona non grata, where smart Turin boys didn't go to celebrate. The phone buzzed again. Another message, meet me tomorrow, midnight, Ponte Vittorio Emanuele Un. Come alone, or Elena learns what her brother really died for. Giuseppe's vision blurred. He gripped the edge of the bar so hard his knuckles went white. The grappa rose in his throat, bitter and burning. Elena knows why he was. What could Elena possibly know about that night? She had been 16, still living at home, still believing in fairy tales and happy endings. She had cried herself sick when they told her Marco was dead. had screamed at God and fate and the unfairness of a world that took big brothers away from little sisters who worshipped them. But Marco in Naples? Marco in a nightclub surrounded by strangers, 3 days before a drunk Diego Maradona would plow his Ferrari into a curve on the road back to Turin? Giuseppe's mind raced through the timeline he'd memorized, the sequence of events that had been burned into his soul. March 18, 1994. Juventus had played Napoli away, won 3-1. Marco had stayed home to study. Giuseppe had listened to the match on the radio while working late at the bar. Maradona, devastated by yet another loss to his former club's rivals, had spent the night drinking and snorting cocaine. At 2:47 a.m., he had gotten behind the wheel of his Ferrari and fled Naples like a coward. At 3:15 a.m., he had hit a Fiat Punto on a dark stretch of highway outside Caserta. The driver, a 19-year-old kid from Turin returning from what the police report called a weekend visit to friends, died on impact. A weekend visit to friends. That's what the investigators had concluded. That's what Giuseppe had told everyone. That's what Elena believed. But Marco in a nightclub 3 days before he died. Marco somewhere he shouldn't have been. With people Giuseppe didn't know. Elena knows why he was... Giuseppe's phone clattered to the floor as he stumbled toward the bathroom. He barely made it before his stomach emptied itself. 15 years of carefully constructed truth pouring out of him like poison. He knelt on the cold tile floor, forehead pressed against the porcelain, and wept for the first time since they'd lowered Marco's casket into the ground. When the spasms finally stopped, he looked up at his reflection in the mirror above the sink. The man staring back was a stranger, hollow-eyed, broken, haunted by questions that had no answers. Tomorrow, he would meet Maradona. Tomorrow, he would learn what his daughter knew that he didn't. Tonight, his world had already ended. Giuseppe didn't sleep. He sat in the kitchen of his small apartment above the bar, staring at the phone lying silent on the scarred wooden table. Every few minutes, he would reach for it, then pull his hand back as if the device might burn him. Call Elena, warn her, ask her what she knows, but the words wouldn't come. How do you ask your daughter what secret she's been keeping about her dead brother? How do you admit that 15 years of shared grief might have been built on lies? Dawn crept through the shutters like an unwelcome visitor. Giuseppe made coffee with trembling hands, the familiar ritual providing no comfort. The espresso tasted like ash. Everything tasted like ash now. At 7, he opened the bar as he had every morning for 2 decades. The routine felt foreign, as if he were impersonating himself. He arranged the chairs, wiped down tables that were already clean, checked the register twice, anything to avoid looking at the spot where Maradona's envelope had rested. Salvatore arrived first, as always. The old man's knowing eyes swept the bar, taking in Giuseppe's hollow stare, his unwashed clothes, the bottle of grappa still sitting open behind the register. Tazzo, Beppe, you look like death. Giuseppe forced himself to make eye contact. Didn't sleep well. After last night, I'm not surprised. Salvatore settled onto his usual stool, studying Giuseppe's face. You sure you don't want to talk about it? Nothing to talk about. But Salvatore wasn't buying it. He'd known Giuseppe since they were boys kicking footballs in the streets of Borgo d'Ora. He'd been there when Giuseppe married Lucia, when Marco was born, when the cancer took Lucia piece by piece. He'd helped carry the casket. That bastard said something to you, Salvatore said quietly. Before he left. Something about Elena. Giuseppe's hand stilled on the coffee cup he was polishing. You heard that? I hear everything in this place. Question is, what aren't you telling me? The bell above the door chimed, saving Giuseppe from having to answer. Franco entered, shaking rain from his umbrella, followed by 2 other regulars. Their conversations died when they saw Giuseppe's face. Madonna, Franco whispered. You look worse than Maradona did. Giuseppe tried to smile, failed. He served coffee and cornetti, participated in fragments of conversation about yesterday's training session, the upcoming match against Inter. But his mind kept drifting to those photos, Marco laughing, Marco alive, Marco somewhere he shouldn't have been. The morning crawled by. Every time the door opened, Giuseppe tensed, expecting to see Maradona's broken face or worse, Elena, demanding answers to questions he couldn't ask. But the hours passed without incident until, just before noon, his phone rang, Elena's name on the display. Giuseppe stared at it until the ringing stopped, then started again immediately. "You going to answer that?" Salvatore asked. Giuseppe's finger hovered over the screen. The phone fell silent, then immediately began ringing again. Elena never called twice unless something was wrong. "Papa?" Her voice was tight with concern. "I've been trying to reach you all morning. Elena da Carina. I'm sorry, Franco called me." The words hit like a slap. "He told me what happened last night. That bastard came to the bar?" Giuseppe closed his eyes. "Franco, the meddling old fool. Elena, it's not. I'm coming home." "No." The word exploded from him with such force that every head in the bar turned. He lowered his voice. "No, Elena, there's no need. He's gone. Papa, you can't possibly think I'm going to let you deal with this alone. That man," her voice cracked, "that man killed Marco. Elena knows why he was—" "Elena," Giuseppe said carefully, "I need to ask you something." Silence on the other end. "Then what?" He opened his mouth to ask about Naples, about nightclubs, about secrets she might have kept. But the words died in his throat, because asking meant admitting he didn't know his own son. Asking meant destroying the careful fiction they'd built together, Marco the good boy, the devoted son, the innocent victim. "Papa, you're scaring me." "It's nothing," he whispered. "Just be careful, Carina. Promise me." "I promise. But I'm still coming home tonight. Don't argue." The line went dead. Giuseppe set the phone down with shaking hands, aware that Salvatore and the others were watching him with growing concern. "She's coming here," he said to no one in particular. Salvatore leaned closer. "Maybe that's good. Maybe she can help you figure out what that bastard really wanted." Giuseppe looked up at Marco's jersey, then at the clock on the wall. 10 hours until midnight. 10 hours until he learned what Elena knew, what Marco had hidden, what 15 years of grief had been built upon. He poured himself another grappa, ignoring Salvatore's disapproving look. Outside, the rain continued falling like tears.